On today's show, Tony Albrecht, the Yoda of LinkedIn for lawyers. We'll be talking about the simple three-part strategy he's used to create some of the most LinkedIn famous lawyers on the platform and generate more than 50 million views, helping law firms build their brands, attract talent, generate referrals, and turn visibility into real business, all without spending hours on content.
So basically like any creative act. And I view LinkedIn as a blank canvas, that your LinkedIn presence and the platform is effectively a blank canvas where you can do whatever you want. But that means there's a lot of room for resistance to use its different trick.
Welcome to the Alpha Lawyer Podcast, a show dedicated to exploring what makes law firms thrive. I'm your host, Jason Marsh. Join me as I interview some of the smartest thought leaders and accomplished law firm owners in our space. Together, we'll dive deep into law firm operations, marketing, technology, finance, and everything else you need to build an incredible firm that allows you to live your best life. Hello, welcome back to the Alpha Lawyer Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Marsh, and today I'm joined by Tony Albrecht. Hey, Tony, good to see you.
Hey, Jason, good to see you, man.
Yeah, so I read your article in the ABA's Law Practice Today on using LinkedIn, Build Your Brand, a while ago, and you probably remember. When I read it, I was actually pumped, right? I was sitting there thinking, this is brilliant. I need to be doing this. I've never really done much of anything on LinkedIn. And whatever I've done, I probably haven't done it properly. So I remember we were going back and forth a little bit after. I've been trying to get you on this podcast probably for a year now. So I'm really excited that you're here. Because LinkedIn, right, it's one of these platforms, probably every lawyer has it. None of them are using it in any sort of meaningful way. So what I want to talk to you about today is what lawyers are getting wrong. There's a big opportunity that you've sort of highlighted, so we'll get into that. And I also want to talk about, you have a specific three-part strategy, and you've used it to amass like more than 50 million views on LinkedIn to help your clients become some of the most LinkedIn famous lawyers on the platform. So I love that. Obviously, it's not just about being famous. You can build your brand, you can attract opportunities, generate real business. There's a lot that comes out of that. So anyway, before we get all deep into it, I want to give you a proper intro here. So if you all don't know Tony Albrecht, I had to practice his name here before. But if you don't know Tony, he is the guy when it comes to lawyers using LinkedIn. Simple as that, right? He's known as the Yoda of LinkedIn for lawyers. He's the founder of Contender Creative, and he's the premier LinkedIn ghostwriter for lawyers. He's literally written thousands of posts for himself. He's written thousands more as a ghostwriter for his attorney clients. But what I want, before we get into the conversation, what I want to do is highlight the impact of what that is. Tony, there was a client he had around 500 connections on LinkedIn. People probably met in real life, never posted anything. Works with Tony. After a year, more than 2.8 million impressions, grown his network by 10 times, helped with attracting talent to his firm, case referrals, just dramatically increasing brand awareness in a market. It's an injury attorney where he's competing with some of the nation's biggest spenders. So for me, this is pretty amazing stuff, right? It's accessible to probably anybody listening to this. So, all right, Tony, I want to get into this. I'm excited to hear what you have to say. So the first thing is there's a huge opportunity here that you talked about, and we'll get into it in a little more detail. Essentially, you've said there's probably an estimated only 5% of LinkedIn users that actually post or do anything meaningful on the platform. And the reality is it's probably even lower, right, for lawyers. So the short here is this creates a problem of supply and demand, right, for LinkedIn, because the algorithm, of course, wants to show people interesting, engaging stuff, keep them on the platform. So demand is high. Supply is low, and essentially LinkedIn's algorithm is starving for posts. And you've said, like, it's a relatively easy platform to leverage, but the problem in your view is we all learn to use the platform wrong. So let's start here, because I think this is where a lot of lawyers or anybody gets stuck. We've basically been trained to use LinkedIn the wrong way. So what do lawyers, generally speaking, think LinkedIn is for, and where does that all come from?
So, as you know, Jason, before I sort of fell into this thing called LinkedIn ghostwriting, I spent 12 years practicing law. I'm from St. Louis. I spent most of my career as an attorney practicing in Missouri and Illinois. And like just about every lawyer, throughout that time, I pretty much ignored the platform. It was the place where you stash your digital resume. And if you need a job, you go look for a job there. And that was about it, right? So when I talk about how we all learn LinkedIn the wrong way, that's basically it. It's that we all see LinkedIn as effectively a digital bulletin board, that it's a place for announcing when you need a job, announcing when you get a job, and announcing your latest accomplishment, right? And what I say is all that is fine. There's nothing wrong with posting those things. They're not particularly interesting. So, Jason, when you point out that percentage, and there are different numbers out there, is 1% of users post on LinkedIn. I've seen as high as 5%. I tend to think that closer to 1% is probably more accurate. And most of the people who are in that 1% are still operating with that understanding of what LinkedIn is for, right? That it's for basically announcing stuff and sharing, court opinions or Wall Street Journal articles, right? So that supply and demand problem that you're describing is a tremendous opportunity for basically all of us.
So before we get into the opportunity, I want to dig a little deeper on sort of just to make sure we know what we're doing wrong. So this is what we need to stop doing. So I know at one point you mentioned, a lot of lawyers, and I'm this too, pretty much across social media, is a lurker, right? So to you, what does that effectively mean in practice?
So I spent most of my time in practice on the defense side in insurance defense litigation firms. I saw LinkedIn basically as a place I could get in trouble. Right? It was like I saw very little upside to doing anything on LinkedIn, and I definitely saw downside. If I was going to post anything, it had to be perfect, right? Factually perfect, grammatically perfect. The thing I really did not want to have happen was me post something and have anybody have anything negative to say about it. Not anybody I work with, not anybody I work for, not anybody who's ever seen me out in in the bar association or just around town, right? It was
so there's a lot of fear around posting for people, I think. I think it's just normal. I certainly feel that. All the things you talked about. I'm kind of a shy, private person. I have a podcast, but still, this is effectively a one-on-one conversation for me. But to just broadcast personal stuff, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, it's scary, right?
100%. And I refer to The War of Art, a book by a guy named Stephen Pressfield, frequently in the things I talk about, where that book, Pressfield makes a case for something called resistance. That resistance is this natural force that pushes back on us whenever we try to do anything to make the world better or to make ourselves better. So basically like any creative act. And I view LinkedIn as a blank canvas, that your LinkedIn presence and the platform is effectively a blank canvas where you can do whatever you want. But that means there's a lot of room for resistance to use its different tricks to kind of get in our heads and tell us we shouldn't try to get more active, for this, like we don't have enough time, or it's not billable, or like I may say something wrong, right? I may put my foot in my mouth, right? So perfectionism and distraction, and there are all these different ways that resistance shows up.
Yeah, and the perfectionism, I think, is an important one. You think about lawyers, right? Mm-hmm. They're generally very buttoned up, or at least very specific in terms of what they're putting forth in terms of the work product. Mm-hmm. And so you would think that would carry over. And obviously, perfection is, really the enemy of just doing something that's good enough. And so I want to talk, this opportunity, because I think this is important to understand. And I was really surprised by it. But you give a great, example about this lawyer who went from basically doing nothing on LinkedIn, right, to having millions of impressions, generating referrals and real business out of it. So, your point isn't some edge case. This is actually available to most attorneys right now, and the underlying premise there is that supply and demand imbalance. Can you break that down just into simple terms?
Yes. I've been doing this for 3.5 years now. This is how I've been feeding my family. And for all that time, most of my clients have been in the personal injury space. They're plaintiffs' personal injury lawyers. That said, you mentioned how that client of mine operates in a market where there are very big spenders. He's in the market with the biggest spender on the planet, and his LinkedIn presence is better, is stronger than any lawyer at that firm that spends more money on advertising than anybody on the planet. And this client of mine, he just hired his third lawyer. And so when we started, he had just hired his second lawyer. And so it's a small practice. He's a relatively young guy. I think he's still on the right side of 40. And so it's a roundabout way of approaching the question, Jason, of like, what is this opportunity? The opportunity is one that is readily available for smaller firms. I would say for firm owners who don't have a ton of marketing spend or who rely on referrals. That if you want to build your firm, if you are looking to generate more clients and cases through referrals from other lawyers in your market, there is no better place than LinkedIn to do that.
Yeah, I love that, the referral component. Can you go into that in more detail? Because sometimes I think people post and they think the response is going to be, I'm going to get a lead or an opportunity directly from my post. But whereas the opportunity may be something slightly different, where you're building know, like, and trust among your peers that have the opportunity to refer business, right? Is that what you're getting at?
100%. We're talking about the difference between demand generation and lead generation, right? And I know you know this better than I do, Jason. You've done this for a living a lot longer than I have.
Yeah, well, let's. Yeah, of course I know, but why don't you explain the difference between
happy to
demand and what was the other one? Lead generation.
Indeed. So the impulse that we have when we think about showing up as a business owner on social media is, how do I get new clients, right? From that post. And our hope, the way we think about it, is that I post, client sees post, client calls me and says, hey, I have a case for you, or I have work for you.
Right, this linear thing.
Yes, this very more like almost like direct response marketing sort of thing, right? And so that would be like lead gen, right? That we're posting and we're just looking to get those folks in at the top of the funnel with the hope that, you know, some percentage of people come out the bottom as clients. When I talk about demand gen, I'm talking about making you magnetic on LinkedIn. So the goal is not that we are trying to get leads, just add names to a list. The goal is that you are becoming the person to solve this specific problem for this specific group of people in your market. Right? We're trying to make you the one of one in the way that I
love this. This is when I read this. This is the thing that got me excited, and I think for a lot of other people too, to be that person. Love that. That's the magic.
It is something I totally stumbled on by accident. And I got to tell you, I've had to be brought along kicking and screaming. Like when I gained traction on LinkedIn ghostwriting did not occur to me as a way to make money back in late 2021. And when I had a couple friends in my ear saying, you might want to consider helping lawyers with their LinkedIn. I had just left the practice. I had taken on a business development role with a buddy's company. I got to tell you, I liked not being a lawyer anymore. I liked not dealing. There's a longer story there we don't need to go into. But I was happy not practicing anymore. And the idea of going back to spending my time with lawyers, I was like, I don't know about that. I'm so glad I took that advice, because I've had a blast getting to do what I do. But over the course of the last few years, I have established myself as the guy you talk to if you're a lawyer who wants to gain traction on LinkedIn, right? And so I do generate leads. I do track leads, like all that good stuff of being a business owner, right? But a lot of my leads come from they come inbound because of my personal brand and how established I am on the LinkedIn platform. But then the real magic, right, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to this idea of becoming magnetic and generating demand for you, is that there are so many other types of opportunities that I would not have anticipated.
Yeah, talk about that stuff, because that's interesting.
I have clients who, I have a client who hired 2 new lawyers last month. Both of those clients, or both of those lawyers, basically came to them saying, I want to come work for you. And they both referred directly to the things that my 2 clients from this firm had been posting for the previous 3 years as like their motivation. Like, they weren't necessarily looking for jobs. They had good jobs, both of these lawyers. They said, I want to work for you. Right? I have another client who just hired his first COO for his law firm. They got down to 2 candidates, both great, strong, experienced people. And during the interview process, both those candidates expressed in no uncertain terms that they wanted the job, in part because of what he had been sharing on LinkedIn. That they came in, they got a sense of the culture, they got a sense of who he is, they got a sense of the values, and a way of saying, like, I want to be here helping you further your mission. So that talent piece, it was not something, if we're talking 3 years ago, I was not clear on that. That has been a huge one. And then there's also there's the brand awareness, the name ID, speaking opportunities that come up with local groups, or let's say I work with a lot of trial lawyers. So like trial organizations across the country.
It's almost like a flywheel, right? You build that, as you said, magnetic personality or profile that leads to more opportunities to go speak. And again, all the time you're building that know, like, and trust, right? Along the way, becoming even more magnetic. But what I love about what you were just saying there is, right, we think about LinkedIn, it's a marketing channel. We're going to get business from it. That's the goal. But you talked about another major problem that it potentially solved for a client, and that's recruiting, right? That's a big challenge, hiring not just good people, but great people. That's very difficult and can be very expensive, right? Hiring recruiters and so forth. But to have that where you almost have inbound applications from people that they don't even know if you're hiring, but they just want to work with you because they love what they've seen. I think that in and of itself is amazing.
Yeah, it's been great to see. I've used it for growing my own team as well. We playing around with the idea of organic recruiting, that instead of, and to your point about LinkedIn as a business, like LinkedIn, their business model for a long time was built around recruiting, right? Like that's what it was basically, like a recruiting platform. And now this is a way of using your presence and your posts to attract, as opposed to putting up, again, that digital bulletin board, putting that post up and hoping the right people come in, when I don't know how much you've posted jobs on LinkedIn, Jason, but it can be hit or miss in terms of who comes in. But you really are able to attract high caliber people who are not just looking for a job. Not that there's anything wrong with folks who are looking for jobs. I've been there and I know the struggle, but like you're able to attract people who are specifically looking to work for you. It's really powerful.
Go ahead if you have more.
I was going to say just one more finer point on the opportunity piece for lawyers who are looking to generate referrals. We talked about perfectionism. We talked about kind of the fear that keeps people from posting. A lot of people, I think, just don't see the upside. It's like, why would I do that? Right? So it's not really like they're afraid. They don't see the point. What I tell people is that LinkedIn is the world's best billboard, right? That it's a way that you can have your name, your face, and your message, right, show up consistently on the feeds of people you're interested in getting to know better. And you're able to control the narrative. And unlike a billboard where you're limited to, 10 words or so, you can use kind of as many words as you want to. You have so much more control over what you're showing. And also, unlike a billboard where you're basically putting it out for everybody, it's for who happens to pass by that way on the road. Here, when you post on LinkedIn, I describe it like you're dropping a stone in water and the ripples kind of go out. And where a post starts is with your direct network. So when you post, that post is first going to be shown to people in your network. And that's going to be shown to people in those people's networks. And it kind of moves out organically like that. And when we're talking about lawyers and how few post, the reality is that most of the lawyers you're interested in sending you cases, and I don't care whether you're somebody who handles trucking litigation in a big market or you're a relatively small town trust and estates lawyer who does wills for people, most of the people that you are looking to talk to spend almost no time posting or engaging on LinkedIn. Right? They, to your point, Jason, they're lurking. So they will not engage with your stuff. They will not comment on your post. They will not send you a message. They might mention something when you see them around town. That's one thing.
Yeah.
And then also they'll ping you when they got something for you. Right? And typically you don't know who's listening or who the message is resonating with until the opportunities pop up. It's like, oh, there's a serendipitous quality about it that I find rather fun. But I wanted to articulate that more clearly, that dynamic.
I mean, it's because, and the other thing is you've said that everything you're describing here, and we're going to get into the actual playbook that you have and get into it in some detail so people can learn exactly what they should be doing. But you've said this is a relatively easy platform to win on, right, compared to others. And I think it just, again, it underscores the opportunity we're talking about is that so few competitors are doing this specific thing, unlike SEO, ads, whatever it is, the channel where you're competing. It's a bloodbath, right? It's Red Sea. This is blue ocean right here, right? I mean, to the T. So anyway, so why don't we get into the actual sort of playbook, because you lay out a pretty simple, but I think incredibly powerful framework and clearly driven a lot of results for you and your clients. But I want people to see that this doesn't require a ton of time or and I imagine people in their mind are thinking, oh, I'm going to be a full-time or, part-time content creator. So just can you start off just to highlight what the 3-part strategy for you is, and then we'll dive into each one of those separately to get into the details. But what is that roughly 3-part strategy?
Sure. So I think I first posted about this in January of 2022. This was very soon after I started paying attention to LinkedIn in earnest. I started posting daily for myself on New Year's Day of January 2022. And the strategy I was working with was, number 1, be consistent. Number 2, be generous. And number 3, be interesting. That third one is shifted. I'll say like be yourself as well. But yeah, that's it.
You're right. And it almost sounds, oh, that's obvious, right? Consistency, that completely makes sense. I think the be generous part, maybe that's the part that people need to understand a little bit more around. But, to be interesting and to be authentically yourself in doing so, yeah, that's right. All seems to make sense. So, but let me ask you, how did you arrive at like this specific approach? Now, was this like trial and error? Because I know you've been at this for a few years. What happened there?
So I got plugged in to a guy named Justin Welsh's orbit. And Justin is kind of the OG when it comes to building a business on LinkedIn. He has one of the biggest followings. He's an incredible creator. And he had a course called The Operating System. He also had a community, and he effectively trained everybody. I mean, like everybody who was paying attention to LinkedIn at that time, that what you do is you post at 8 a.m., Monday through Friday, and you spend, let's say, a half hour responding to comments after you do that. And you probably also should spend 15 minutes before that warming up the algo. You want to go around commenting on other people's post before that. And so I took all that in. I was playing that game. I was spending hours a day on the platform in 2022. That was my kind of crash course, my education. So at that time, the consistency piece Everybody preached about that. Authenticity was a big thing. And what does that look like? That there's that meme about this isn't Facebook. That idea that if you're going to be on LinkedIn, you should be quote unquote professional, which means I think of it as like a personified version of those professional headshots, right? So buttoned up, serious, boring. I mean, boring for lack of a better term, right?
And all of that adds to probably the fear of actually engaging with it and doing all the things we're going to talk about, right?
100%. Yeah. And that was the heart of the opportunity that I kind of fell into in 2022 of just, you said blue ocean. That's right. That there were so few people who were showing up on LinkedIn in a way that could attract attention, that if you were, the way I describe it is, if you're willing to be more interesting than a press release, you can do all right out here. Right? And that was true then, 4 years ago, 5 years, 4. And it's still true today. Like, there are a lot more people contributing to conversations. And I think specifically in the legal corner of the platform, there's a lot more happening today than there was 4 years ago, which I think is awesome. It's a rising tide lifts all boats situation. But yeah, when we were looking at what the landscape on the platform looked like, just about everybody is kind of thinking in terms of an old school idea of what professional looks like and trying to stay in that box and toe the company line and not rock any boats or step out of line. And if you were willing to just be yourself, you have an unfair advantage. And then that generous piece was one that I've come to think about as when I describe how we learn LinkedIn the wrong way, that we learn it as this digital bulletin board. I think what flipped for me was really starting to see it as a network, that it really, in the same way that your network is your net worth out in the real world, the same can be true on LinkedIn. And so once you start thinking about yourself as a node in the network, and everybody else is a node in the network, then the game isn't so much about how do I, well, in the way we used to think about it, just not get in trouble. Or if we start seeing it as like, oh, there may be a way to make money on LinkedIn, not seeing it as like simply a lead machine, right? What if we think about it as a real network where the more we put in terms of our time, our energy, our attention, our appreciation, the more we can get out of it, that we're actually building our social capital and we're strengthening our network. I think about it as in a very visual way of I'm a node, I'm a little dot, and Jason, you're a dot, and everybody's a dot. And the goal is just to strengthen the connectors between myself and a bunch of other people. And the more I can strengthen those individual connectors between myself and other people in the network, the stronger my network gets. And the more I can strengthen my network, the more the benefits compound, the more opportunities I can attract in all these different ways.
Yeah, there's no question that done in your way, I mean, the opportunities really are abundant. And so, yeah, it seems like your philosophy from the course you took with Justin Welsh evolved over the years. And I want to get into the individual steps specifically, but just let's just talk about your big picture, your philosophy. What is the thing that works now on LinkedIn versus, what even the gurus were saying a few years ago?
So one of the biggest shifts for me in terms of my own mindset on LinkedIn is around inputs, which is, like I said, I was spending a ton of time and energy on the platform. That was key for my development and just developing the level of understanding that I did about what works. I'd say even by the time I started Contender, I was posting every day, and I knew a number of other ghostwriters who had clients and produced content for those clients. And the conventional wisdom was that you do for clients what we've done for ourselves. And if you were a LinkedIn ghostwriter, it's like you posted a ton, right? So like we all did. And when I started Contender, I had a theory that I didn't have to do that for my clients. That if I was aiming for lawyers, that number one, lawyers don't care. Like you're not worried about going from I've not posted anything in 9 months to we need to be posting every day. Like they don't care. And also I knew going in that I was going to be focused on quality over quantity. And so the more you post, the harder it is to maintain, say, a high level of quality. And so I think what we've seen over these 3.5 years has, I think, proven that those assumptions that I was making back then were correct, where I refer to a site called Favicon that tracks social media influence on various platforms. And there's a ranking of the top lawyers in different countries, different continents. And at this point, I work with 3 of the top 10 lawyers in the U.S., and on our roster at Contender, we have, I believe, 11 of the top 100 lawyers. And that's out
Amazing.
of more than 100,000 lawyers. We've got 11 of the top 100. And when we work with somebody, the question is, we have a very basic offer on our core ghostwriting service, which is, do you want 1 post a week or 2? Right? And we don't do
that's
more
all you
than
need,
that.
right? So just to make it clear to people, we're not talking about you got to post every day and spend an hour a day or something. It's less is more. Obviously, the less needs to be good, but we're talking really a post, maybe 2 a week for sort of the people that want to go crazy.
I think that's right. Yeah. And I've been developing this framework I call the 1-5-10 over the last 9 months. And we've started to see some people actually trying it out in the wild, which has been good.
I want to try this.
The basic idea is that I think you can meaningfully grow your LinkedIn presence with 1 hour a week by posting 1 story-driven post, sending 5 generous direct messages, and leaving 10 substantive comments. And so just by doing those 3 activities on a weekly basis, I think that can be that level of consistency, that 1-5-10. So that can count as consistent. I think when we hear consistency, the impulse is to think we mean every day or like spending an hour a day, yada, yada, yada.
So hold on. So now that we're getting into the actual strategy here, right? So this is step 1 of his 3-part framework, right? Being consistent, because, you've said a lot of people, they want to overcomplicate things, assume, right, they got to post every day to get the results, but that's hardly what it is. It's literally 1 time a week. You're saying one post a week, 5 like nice direct messages and 10 like thoughtful comments. I mean, I love that anybody can do that, right? That anybody can do that. So let's talk about how you do each one of those, like what each one of those things, needs to look like to actually, so somebody can understand. And let me ask you this, right? The 1 post a week, I'm not sure, does it make more sense to talk about that in sort of step 2 and 3 about being generous and being interesting? Or because I know your posts have a particular style, a particular approach or flavor. I've seen them, I've read them, they're not like most of the stuff you're seeing. I feel like I'm seeing more of what you're doing now since I've gotten to know you, like it's catching on.
You're in the orbit now. Yeah. You're attracting Contender clients.
I'm like, you're talking about a certain car type and then you see it everywhere. But yeah, I want to talk about sort of writing the post. So do you think, I don't know, where do you want to do that in the course of the conversation? Because I also want to talk about the proper way to send a direct message and also to leave a comment to do your actual framework.
So we're thinking about how to be useful to people who are thinking about getting more active. Is that the idea?
You've got your three-step approach, right? Be consistent, be generous, and then be interesting and yourself in the process. I want to go into detail on how you write your 1 post a week, how you write your direct messages, how you decide on who to write to. So I don't know. Let's just go through these one by one, and then we can talk more about because that's essentially what's going to get you to being consistent. And then we can talk about the other parts.
All right. So I'll say, let's flip the 1, 5, 10 on its head, and let's talk about comments first, where if you're, let's say, like a beginner or a newbie to being active on LinkedIn, which is the vast majority of us, commenting can be a nice way to dip your toe in those waters. Right? And when I talk about the 10 thoughtful, substantive comments, we all know the great post comment, that doesn't count.
Right.
What we're looking for here is to be led by what you're interested in. We're actually looking for posts that evoke a reaction in you, that it's not hard to respond because the post itself brings up a thought. It produces an idea or a memory. Right? So we're looking for posts that we can respond to naturally. And that if you can do that in a way that you're showing your perspective in the comment section, that's what we're looking for. And leaving those comments does a few things for you. Number one, it puts you on the poster's radar more, right? Is whenever somebody's posting, they want engagement. Like we all do. Right? So if you come back with something meaningful, you're getting points with that person. A second upside is leaving comments on other people's posts is a great way to draw more attention to your own profile and your own stuff. LinkedIn just a few months ago, started showing impressions on comments. It used to be that you could see impressions on posts, but now you can also see that a solid comment can actually lead to more eyeballs seeing your writing than one of your own posts.
Question.
Right? So there's
on the selection of who, right? You talked about, obviously try to find a post that speaks to you so that you can comment authentically. But because we're trying to be like, I have all kinds of different people show up in my feed. But if you're a lawyer, does that mean you should really focus on other lawyers, other people that are directly in your community? Or does it just not matter? Is it good to just get started and you can put a finer point on it as you go?
That's a great question. My impulse is to say it's a both and thing. You definitely want to be engaging with other lawyers' stuff. There's a challenge of finding enough posts that you genuinely find interesting. Particularly if you're somebody who is just starting to pay attention, your feed probably doesn't have much stuff that you're very interested in. So that actually leads me to the third point I was going to say about like the power of commenting is that the comments can lead you. When you're in comment section, you might find other comments from people that you find interesting, and then you can go check them out, connect with them, and it's a nice, easy way to start expanding your network and influencing what your feed looks like. As LinkedIn is going to show you, to your point about you think you're seeing more and more stuff from contender clients, when you pay more attention to something, LinkedIn is going to feed you more of that stuff or stuff that even looks like that stuff, right? So it's not just stuff that you've engaged with directly, but if, let's say, if Jason comments on a post that the algorithm thinks I might be interested in, then that post might show up on my feed with a message that says, Jason Marsh commented on this post over here, right? So it's another way to curate your feed. So you're influencing what's showing up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it helps you just curate your feed without a lot of effort of going and looking for profiles. The algorithm will help them find you, or the profiles find you, to give you more of what you like. And I feel like, I don't care what social media channel on, like curating your feed is the whole thing that makes it useful. If it's just a bunch of garbage you don't care about, it's hard to be engaged with the feed. So yeah, that's a pretty cool just byproduct of finding posts that you like, commenting on them, and then the algorithm will give you more.
Yep, it's a huge piece. And I guess to close the loop on your question about who you should be looking for, one thing we do with our clients to get clear on their personal brand is to identify who your people are, who's your target audience. For most people, that target audience is going to be more than one bucket of people, more than one group. Where if you're, let's say, a personal injury firm owner that we work with, one bucket of your target audience is going to be potential referral partners. Right? Another bucket is most likely going to be, let's say, legal professionals more generally, or you could even extend that to legal professionals and law students. So again, like your talent pool, right? And that's a different group than just lawyers who might refer you cases. And then a third might be like local folks, right? So you're posting things about what you're doing in the community. And so you may have those three distinct groups of people. And you can aim different posts in different directions, right? But so when we're thinking about like who should we be interacting with, we want to be thinking about what are our goals. Like, is your goal, we've talked about that at some length, right? But you're identifying the goal, and then you want to look for folks who are relevant to what you're trying to do there.
I once had I think it was a family attorney, he sort of liked to do like higher net worth, divorce cases and stuff, of course. But he was saying a good referral source sometimes was real estate agents in his community, right? Because people are getting divorced, they're selling the house or doing something like that. So maybe that's like an example of, obviously you want other attorneys in your feed, in your network, but also other people that could be good referral sources for you to have a sense of, again, just building that know, like, and trust with those folks as well.
100%. Yep.
So if there's more, if you have more on comments, for sure.
Nope. I was going to jump to the DMs.
Yeah, the DMs. I'm really curious about this one.
So just like we ignore posting on LinkedIn, we don't like posting, we don't really like commenting, we don't like sending DMs. And in a weird way, it's almost like messaging people is the hardest because you got to figure out what to say to one specific person.
And just real quick, is this someone you're already connected with, or someone maybe you saw something they did that was interesting, you're not connected with them, but you want to send this DM as a connection request?
Both and. Yeah, I'll take either one. And so, one of the things we talk to people about is like, who might you send a DM to? Could be people from the past, could be colleagues you have a reason to talk to now, could be somebody you just see a post of theirs and you appreciate it, to your point. Jason, like if you're connected, then, a connection whose post you appreciate it. If you're not connected, sending that connection request that just says, hey, I saw that post, I appreciate what you said. Like, it doesn't have to be a novel. It doesn't have to be profound. You're just trying to be a human being and like, say something genuine. And for a lot of people, the DMs they tend to get kind of overloaded with folks pitching stuff.
No doubt about that, man.
Yeah, it's a
profile,
dumpster fire.
But give me an example of, okay, you see something you thought was good. You want to be a human. Like, how long does it need to be? What would you write, just as an example?
I'll give you an example of, say, a lawyer actually he's down in Georgia, but he's a guy I've known for years. We worked together a little bit. I was coaching him a little bit a couple of years ago, and he just posted about his most recent trip with his family. Right? And so I engaged on the post, and then I sent him a DM. Just say, hey man, that looked like an awesome trip. Haven't seen you in a while. How you been doing? So that kind of thing, right? It's like just when somebody gives you something to maybe respond to, and it's not me, I'm not about to pitch that guy. It's just me reaching out, and again, that idea of strengthening the bond between myself and another node in the network. That's just me. I think of that as just being generous with time and attention to engage with this post, which, again, makes us feel good and can help the post perform better. And then also to say, just to put in the effort to say, I was thinking about you enough that I'm going to say something to you, right? It's so simple, but so few people do it. that when you do, it stands out.
Right. Imagine how that is received, right? For any of us, to somebody to just reach out to you and say, hello, how you doing? I enjoyed a thing I read or saw about you. That feels good. And you're just putting good vibes out there. I like that. Listen, I had a question just going back to the comments and the importance of you commenting and people they see you. But to that extent, when you think about your LinkedIn headline, how important is that? Because when people see, Jason or whoever commented, the next thing they're going to see next to that person's name is their headline and who they are. And so how important is that headline, particularly the first sentence or several words in the headline that people are going to see to more quickly maybe identify how you're trying to position yourself on LinkedIn in general?
Yeah, so we've barely touched on the positioning stuff of how you set up your profile. I talk about your corner of the internet. Like, what is the piece of digital real estate you're out to claim and own? That the clearer you can get on that, the better positioned you're going to be magnetic. And I think of that headline is key because, like you're saying, when you comment or when somebody goes to your profile, that's going to be one of the first things you see. Particularly that first, it's usually like 7 words. And so when you're introducing me, you did what a lot of people do when they refer to me these days, the Yoda of LinkedIn for lawyers.
Right.
That's the front of my headline. That's not by accident, right? So we learn headlines as I am this position at this company, right? And that's fine. That's information. There's so much more we can do. Like, how do we put that headline to work in terms of differentiating us from other people, right? So if I say I'm, the founder of Contender Creative, okay, you know some about me, but it doesn't tell you much about what that is, right? It doesn't
tells you nothing,
doesn't pull you in. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, the headline, it's worth flagging that there's a better way, which is basically how do you get a verb in there? And I didn't do it on mine, but how do you get some action in there about the work you do and the impact you have, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot. I love that. That's a nice structure, the work you do and the impact. I've heard people, this is better. Yours is, I've heard people say sort of what you do and who you do it for. But I think the impact, that's the thing, right? Everybody looks at things from their own perspective and impact. Even when I was setting you up today, I'm like, yeah, you do all this stuff around LinkedIn, but let's talk about the impact and its significance. So cool. I'm glad we touched on that because, yeah, we didn't really get into the positioning, but the headline goes to the heart of that. It's obviously important. I want to get into the sort of the be generous step, and maybe we'll start talking about how to craft the post, what your sort of secret sauce is there. But just in terms of following this 1-5-10 framework, right? Again, that's sort of 1 post, 5 direct messages, and 10 comments in LinkedIn per week. What's a realistic time commitment to do this properly each week?
If you're efficient, I think an hour could do it. I think 90 minutes maybe more realistic. It kind of depends on how fast you can produce a post, I think. But let's say we're still early enough in the process where I'm collecting data on how long it takes people to do this.
But I mean, let's just say an hour a week, even to get started, because I think, the most important thing people can do in this type of stuff is imperfect action. Just get started, Start doing it. If you start trying to think and plan and do, for me, that's always sort of just been a sort of a mask for procrastination. So yeah, just start with an hour, right? I think, again, it's tough when you're busy sometimes even to be like, where's an hour going to come from? But I at least wanted to highlight that's what it takes, right? An hour a week. Yep. And again, we go back to the results that you've seen because I think that's what people want to get at here. So, all right, the next part of your framework, being generous, right? Which is interesting, right? Because it runs completely opposite to what people historically thought about posting on LinkedIn, was just post something self-promotional, right? And that's kind of the opposite of being generous. So what is being generous? What does that actually mean?
It's that idea that instead of thinking that LinkedIn is a place where you announce stuff and then have people shower you with praise, which is all well and good, that to be really effective in terms of attracting and creating opportunities, it really pays to be a generous node in the network.
So does that mean complimenting?
No, when we're talking about comments, when we're talking about DMs, I do think of those as generous acts, which is to say you're taking your time and your attention and your thoughts, and you are focusing them on that person, on something they said. Right? That is a generous act. It can be. Right? Now, there will be people who kind of use comments as a way to just try to pull more attention to them. Right? Or there are people who are running hustles where the idea is to comment. If you're a seller in a space, you comment on as many posts as you possibly can with the hope that you're just increasing your brand awareness, your name ID. I find that stuff annoying, and I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze on that. Others may differ with me on that, but that's my take. But when we show up in ways that are generous, I think of it like a bank account, that those comments, those DMs, those interactions are deposits. You're building up your account balance on the LinkedIn network. And the higher your balance is, the more influence you have in the network, the more capital you have that kind of helps with your positioning. And also, you can cash that stuff in. That when you need something or when you want to sell something, if I've got a workshop I'm wanting to fill, I can post to my network saying, hey, I'm doing this thing. Or if I'm looking to hire another ghostwriter, I can post and say, hey, I'm looking for this kind of person. Are you that person? Or do you know somebody who might be that kind of person? I'm not shouting out into the void. It's not linear. It's not predictable. But at this point, my balance on LinkedIn is high enough that I can post with confidence that when I say something, people are going to respond, that people are going to come back because we have connection. Like there's a sense of connectivity between us. It's a very peculiar thing. I mean, I've been doing this for a living for a few years now, and it's still something that kind of amazes me at times, like how that stuff works. But I haven't had a drink since 2010, and one of the things that I learned when I was getting sober back then in the rooms of AA way back was the idea that it's in my self-interest to be more selfless, right? That actually it's better for me when I'm less of an egomaniac. And when it comes to LinkedIn and how you build your presence and attract opportunities, 100% true in that context as well.
Yeah, I've heard this like sort of in another context with just maybe broader business, but the idea is that you give, and then you give, and you give some more, and then you keep on giving, and then you can make your ask for whatever it is. But kind of to your point, you've built up your bank account of trust that this person is not just out here asking for stuff for themselves, but they're givers. And so this all, I guess, goes right back into the be generous. So in terms of being hopefully just natively a comment, a direct message is going to be a generous act. How do you do that in a post?
Yeah, let's get to the posting piece of this, where I think posts are they can also be generous. And I think posts are all three of these things. When we're talking about posting, commenting, messaging, all three of these are ways to be generous, and they are all ways to be interesting as well. That at the fundamental, foundational level, when I think about how to attract positive attention on LinkedIn, we want to be ourselves. You want to be you. So I think about this in terms of wanting to show your point of view basically in everything you do, regardless of whether it's a post, a comment, a DM. You want to inject enough of yourself into what you're doing that it's clearly you, right? That it's your perspective. And so when I'm thinking about what you asked about what does posting in a generous way look like, very simply, we talked a little bit about target audience, your people, the different groups of people. If I'm thinking about how to be generous in a post of mine, one way to do that is to think about one of those groups of people and to think, what can I Like, what do I have to share with these people that might be useful to somebody? And so that can look like, let's say if you're an experienced lawyer, it can be a post where you're sharing a tip on what makes you good at what you do. I just did a post about jury instructions for one of my clients, how one of my clients thinks about jury instructions, which is like this big, dry book of legalese that nobody likes spending time with. But that the more you do, it can become a real competitive advantage. Yeah. So just like this lawyer who's been very successful, just sharing this for, let's say, lawyers earlier in your career. Like if you just got started, you want to get a copy of this book and you want to put it on your desk, and the more you read it, the better off you're going to be. Like, that's a generous act. Like sharing that tip. A second way of doing it is sharing a story. And a lot of times, the word vulnerable gets thrown out a lot.
Because this is where I've seen your posts and those of your clients, and it's a lot. It's telling a story about a specific thing rather than just some generic take. Or so yeah. Can you talk more about how you tell these stories, where you're sourcing the topic or the inspiration, and roughly how to craft those things?
Sure.
And also, can you use AI tools to help you with this stuff, or do you recommend staying away from that? Just because everybody writes everything. I know there's a lot of AI slop out there. So if you're going to use AI, I imagine there's a way to do it, obviously. So just curious about your take on that as well.
All right. I'm hearing 2, if not 3 questions. Let's see if I can attack them in order and in fairly short order. So I do think of storytelling as central to my style, how I show up on the platform, how my clients show up. We start from a position of, again, claiming your corner of the internet, right? That piece of digital real estate you're out to claim and own. And then we're just sharing our perspective from that corner. A lot of people won't be interested. That's fine. Keep going. There's plenty to pay attention to. The people who are interested, you know what you're going to get. Here's where we sit. Here's what we stand for. Here's the kind of stuff we talk about. But you mentioned how kind of the stories, they can stand out. It's traditionally we think of LinkedIn posts as sort of like just the facts, ma'am, that we lead with the information. And what that has led to, and this was very true when I started doing this, I think it's still true to a large degree. So you get LinkedIn posts that look sort of like SEO optimized blog posts, which is fine. It's like, it can be informational, not interesting to anybody. Like nobody is interested in reading that, and that's why those posts don't work.
And is it because there's not a personal or authentic component to it, in the sense of you got maybe the interesting part, but you're not sort of being yourself? It's just a blog post.
No, I'd say it's not interesting. It's that if you're just sharing like, hey, here's a thing about insurance law, or here's something you need to think about when you get in a car accident, it's just not interesting. Like that's the problem with it.
How do you flip
that?
But
to your point, it's like it is the information that could have been posted by anybody, right? It's not you. That information could have been any other lawyer in your market, maybe even in the country, right? So it's like if what you're putting out there can't be differentiated from what anybody else might have been able to produce, you're going to have a really hard time having that thing stand out, which is why we start with what's your POV, like what's your perspective? And we're always looking to come up with those stories of, it's a lot of it is about the practice of law. So it's about things that come up in cases or in trials or in running a law firm. We're just looking for moments of learning, like usually lessons learned the hard way.
So talking about this happened, and I learned something, and telling that story. Because I'm trying to, what you're describing here, I'm trying to make sure I understand it. Hopefully the audience can understand it as well, because this seems like the trickiest part, right? What you're talking about here is, it doesn't, to me, seem like there's a big difference between trying to write something you think is interesting, what you're saying is not interesting. I'm like, what's that missing piece? And it sounds like it's having your own point of view within that topic or your experience and how you got there potentially. Is that it?
Thinking about your question. What you're saying is true. You are accurately reflecting my beliefs. I think that distinction of like what's interesting versus not interesting, I think there's a piece of it where, so this is something that you and I as, let's say, sellers, like with our agencies, when we have an ICP, right, an ideal client, and if we're posting on LinkedIn, one of the groups of people we're very interested in is people in our ICP. Something that is true about our ICP, and if you're a lawyer, your ICP, is that that person has absolutely no interest in learning about what you do. Almost always this is true. Until they want to solve that problem, right? That until the moment they want to solve the problem, no interest in engaging with content on that topic, right? So if you're writing stuff that is speaking directly to the information, like the stuff about solving that problem, but you're just sharing the facts, then who's going to be interested in that? Because it's not going to be the people you want to hire you. Those people probably aren't going to be interested in that. And it's not going to be anybody else either, right? So the story, we've been telling stories for tens of thousands of years, right? So it's just tapping into that human impulse of wanting to hear stories. Like, let me tell you a story about the time that and you're able to talk about like whatever it is, like whatever those posts are, that information you want to share, you're able to post about that stuff. But I'm always looking to your question about like, how do you get out the good stuff? It's like, if you have an idea for a post or a principle or an update that you're looking to provide, where I'm always going with clients is like, tell me a story about that, or like a moment in your career or in your practice that brings that to life. And then we are going to build that post around that experience where that takeaway is not the headline of the post. That's more the punchline of the post, right? So we're embedding that information, that takeaway we want them to have in the context of a story that shows the client specific point of view. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And I think this is the specific nuance, right, that is probably the hardest thing to get right as you start trying to post. And again, I think for anybody, it's just take the imperfect action, just get started. You can learn and refine over time. What you do the first time is probably not going to be perfect. So yeah, I mean, I love it. And in terms of like, as we start to kind of wrap up and get it, there's a real I think there's a mindset shift that that folks need to understand. What we were just touching on is stop with the announcements and get into the storytelling part. That's the big thing here. Are there any particular types of stories that tend to resonate most with whatever your audience is on LinkedIn?
Origin stories, I think, are the biggest one. It's stories about how you found your career path, how you came to start your business, how you met your partner, whether it's a business partner or a life partner. Like those origin stories about who were you back then and where were you? Like, what was the moment?
Like the journey.
It's like that, those inflection points of like before and after. That, like, what are those? So I think about origin stories and I think about inflection points. Those like moments where it's like something changed and there's a before and there's an after. And often origin stories are a version of those inflection points, right? Where it's like the beginning of a career or the beginning of a business. So I think those two, and I'm always looking for a moment in time. I want to drop in as that action is happening, and then we go from there. So that's the last trick I'll leave you with, which is that we tend to, when we're telling a story, we tend to start with kind of the beginning of whatever that is, of like providing some preamble. And I encourage folks, and this is something we do with our hook writing. Hooks are hugely important. Like you want people, you want to be building suspense or creating intrigue in those first two lines of a post. So I say, drop us right into that juicy moment in the story, start there. Then pull back, give us a little background, and then tell us what happened. That's
I love that. And so that's the hook. That's the hook right there, right at the beginning, building suspense or intrigue in that first line or so. And that's the thing, essentially, the hook that gets people to read the rest of it, right?
Yeah. Don't tell anybody I said that, though. Don't give away all my secrets.
I won't. No, we won't. This will stay right here between us.
Yeah, good.
And one, maybe the last thing before we go, but do you have any specific, like a technique that you advise, your lawyers in terms of just how they can mine stories? Because I think people might, just in their day-to-day practice or as they think about their origin stories, but just a way to kind of just keep an eye, that might be something cool to talk about. Do you have any techniques around that?
I do. And I have a sort of a matrix rubric that we'll use that sort of breaks down in terms of career stages. So it could be like law school, early career, once you started your own business, a lot of these people. And then there's also more topical stuff. So it can be trial stories, litigation stories, people stories, like people in your in the firm, these different sort of categories. And then within there, if we're talking about trials, then it can be trials that ended well for you, trials that did not end well for you, preparing for trial, and then all the stages of preparing, whether it's opening statements, closing statements, and just like as we go down the list and as you kind of break down all these different aspects of what it is to be a lawyer, whatever it is you do, it's identifying those different component parts and then thinking about the moments that come up, like the moments that spontaneously arise, and then zeroing in on it. And it's like, what is, with all my clients when we're talking, I'm looking for heat. I'm looking for energy. I'm looking for things that they care about, right? That there's some emotion, that there's some feeling still associated with that. And we're zeroing in and saying, what's that moment about? Like, why that story? Why does that stick out? Let's unpack that. That's how we find a lot of our stuff. So again, don't tell anybody that.
No, we're going to keep this right here. Really, last question. We've covered a lot of really cool ground here today. And so just in terms of summing up, if lawyers do make this shift and do it consistently over time, what's going to happen?
I don't know what's going to happen. I say on just about every discovery call that the goal is that you gain traction, that when you say something on LinkedIn or when you show up, people pay attention. And I will say, I don't know what's going to happen when we do this. I just know that if it works, and it should work, that things are going to happen. And it's not linear, and it's not predictable, but it's really powerful.
Awesome, man. Yeah, things are going to happen. Might not be totally predictable. I mean, I just love that, man. I'm here with Tony Albrecht. He's the Yoda of LinkedIn for lawyers, right? The premier ghostwriter for firms, having a great conversation. So where do we find Tony? Obviously, I think it suffice to say, you're going to find Tony on LinkedIn. You're going to find your best content on LinkedIn, right? Also point out, you can read his ABA Law Practice Today article, How to Improve Your Business with LinkedIn. That should be How You Improved Your Law Firm with LinkedIn, but it is a legal publication. But also that people can connect with you on your website, contendercreative.com. I know you offer ghostwriting services for law firms, but also firm training workshops, boot camps, so people can visit the website to learn more and apply. Anything you want to add to that? Now you can help people.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Tony, thank you so much for joining me today. This has really been fun. I've been really looking forward to this chat, and it's been well worth the wait.
Thank you, Jason. You asked really good questions. I appreciate the chance to talk to you.
Good stuff, man. Well, Tony Albrecht, everybody, and that's going to be it for today. We've got some great new shows coming up, so we will see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Alpha Lawyer Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Marsh, and I appreciate you joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with other lawyers who might benefit. You can find more resources and insights on building a thriving law firm at alphalawyer.io or the Alpha Lawyer YouTube channel. Until next time, keep building the firm of your dreams so you can live your best life.